The scrapyard prison. The setting sun cast long shadows across the endless sea of metal, turning the scrapyard into a maze of darkness and rusted dreams. Rin wiped the sweat from her forehead with a grimy hand, leaving another streak of dirt across her face. Her thin frame trembled with exhaustion as she lifted another piece of salvage onto the sorting platform. Next to her, Zara worked silently, her dark eyes focused on the task at hand. Both girls wore tattered coveralls that had long since lost their original color, now stained with the perpetual grime of the scrapyard. The Drachnid guards watched from their elevated platforms, their scaled faces impossible to read. "Quota's almost due," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible over the clanking of metal. "We're still short." Rin nodded, trying to ignore the gnawing fear in her stomach. They both knew what falling short meant. Another night in the suspension cells, hanging in painful restraints while neural shocks coursed through their bodies. She pushed herself to move faster, her muscles screaming in protest. The scrapyard stretched for kilometers in every direction, a testament to countless battles and abandoned ships. The Drachnids had turned it into their private salvage operation, using human captives as labor. Their crystalline whips crackled with energy, always ready to strike at the slightest sign of defiance. As Rin reached for another piece of scrap, something caught her eye. Half buried beneath a mountain of debris, she spotted an unusual curved plate of armor. The metal was different from anything she'd seen before, darker, more purposeful in its design. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the markings. "Zara," she breathed. "Look at this." Her friend glanced over, then quickly back to her work. "We don't have time for exploration." "The quota." "It's human tech," Rin interrupted. "Military grade. My mother used to work on stuff like this before." She trailed off, the memory of her mother's capture still fresh despite the years that had passed. The engineering knowledge her mother had passed on was one of the few things the Drachnids couldn't take from her. A guard's heavy footsteps approached, and both girls quickly resumed their work. But Rin's mind was racing. She had seen something in that pile of scrap, something that might be worth any punishment they would face for investigating it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the work horn blared across the yard. Guards began herding the exhausted workers toward the containment facility. Rin and Zara joined the shuffling line, their heads bowed like all the others. "We need to check it out," Rin whispered as they walked. "Tomorrow, during the midday break." Zara shot her a worried look. "They'll catch us. And you know what happened to the last ones who tried to explore." Rin did know. The screams had echoed through the facility for days. But something about that buried piece of tech called to her. It reminded her of her mother's stories, of a time when humans weren't helpless victims. In their sleeping cell, lying on thin mats, Rin stared at the ceiling. The familiar sounds of muffled crying and whispered prayers filled the darkness. Tomorrow, she would either find something worthwhile or add her own screams to the facility's grim symphony. Either way, she had to know what lay buried in that mountain of scrap. She rolled onto her side, watching Zora's sleeping form in the dim light. Her friend had stood by her through countless hardships in this place. Whatever came tomorrow, they would face it together. As exhaustion finally pulled her towards sleep, Rin's mind filled with fragments of her mother's lessons about human machinery and the power it could contain. The first light of dawn would bring neither hope or horror, but for now, in the quiet darkness, Rin held on to the memory of her mother's voice and dreamed of freedom, hidden knowledge. The midday sun blazed overhead as Rin and Zara made their way through the labyrinth of twisted metal. They had traded their morning rations for cover from other workers, buying precious minutes to investigate Rin's discovery. Their footsteps echoed softly against the rusted ground as they approached the massive pile of debris. "There," Rin whispered, pointing to the curved plate she'd spotted the day before. "Help me clear some of this away." Together, they began carefully shifting smaller pieces of scrap, trying to avoid any noise that might attract attention. Sweat dripped down their faces as they worked, the heat of the day intensifying with each passing minute. "Wait," Zara hissed suddenly, grabbing Rin's arm. The distinct sound of Drachnid footsteps approached. Both girls quickly ducked behind a fallen support beam, holding their breath as a guard passed nearby. The crystalline whip at its belt hummed with stored energy, a constant reminder of the price of discovery. Once the guard moved on, they resumed their work. As more debris fell away, Rin's excitement grew. The marking she'd seen wasn't just any military insignia. It was the emblem of the Titan Corps, humanity's elite mechanized division. "My mother used to maintain these," Rin explained softly, her fingers tracing the worn symbol. "She taught me everything she knew, said knowledge was the one thing they couldn't take from us." Her voice caught slightly. "She made me memorize every system, every circuit path, even though we never thought we'd see one." Zara watched her friend's face carefully. "You think we can actually do something with this? If we can find the access hatch." Rin moved along the curved surface, her hands searching with purpose. These weren't just machines, Zora. They were humanity's greatest weapons, semi-autonomous, neural-linked combat platforms. One Titan could hold off an entire invasion force. A soft click echoed through the yard as Rin's fingers found a recessed panel. Both girls froze, waiting to see if anyone had heard. When no guards appeared, Rin carefully pressed the panel. With a hiss of escaping air, a small maintenance hatch swung open. Inside, they found a maze of circuits and conduits. To Zara, it looked like incomprehensible chaos, but Rin's eyes lit up with recognition. Her mother's lessons came flooding back, years of hidden knowledge finally finding purpose. "The primary neural interface is intact," she whispered excitedly. "And look, the core reactor housing isn't even damaged. It's just dormant." She pointed to various components as she spoke, her hands trembling slightly. The Drachnids probably thought it was just scrap because they couldn't interface with the human-specific systems. A sudden commotion from the direction of the workyards caught their attention. The midday break was ending. They quickly sealed the hatch and made their way back, minds racing with possibilities. That night in their cell, Rin drew diagrams in the dust on the floor, explaining systems and connections to Zara. Her friend listened intently, asking questions that showed she was beginning to understand the magnitude of what they'd found. "The neural interface is key," Rin explained, sketching another circuit pattern. "These weren't just piloted machines. They formed a true connection with their operators. The Titan becomes an extension of yourself." She paused, considering. "But we'll need to repair the stabilization systems first. Without those, the neural feedback could kill us." "Kill us?" Zara's voice was barely a whisper. "Rin, maybe we should just forget about this. We could end up like the others who try to escape." Rin looked up at her friend, determination burning in her eyes. "We're already dying here, Zara. Every day takes something more from us. At least this way, we choose our fate." The next few days fell into a pattern. They worked their normal shifts, careful not to draw attention, but every free moment was spent planning. Rin's knowledge, passed down in secret by her mother, became their guide. They began collecting small components, pieces of wire, circuit boards, power cells, that the Drachnids considered worthless. Each night, Rin would continue her mother's tradition, teaching Zara everything she knew about the machine they hoped would save them. The technical knowledge became a form of resistance, a way to reclaim their humanity in a place designed to strip it away. A week into their secret project, they witnessed a public punishment. A worker had been caught trying to sabotage the sorting machines. The Drachnids made everyone watch as they used their neural whips, demonstrating the price of defiance. The screams echoed through the yard, but Rin and Zara exchanged a silent look. Every cry strengthened their resolve. "Tell me again about the neural interface," Zara asked that night, her voice steady despite the day's horrors. "If we're going to do this, we need to understand everything." Rin smiled in the darkness, pride mixing with fear in her chest. They were no longer just surviving. They were preparing for something more. Her mother's voice seemed to echo in her mind as she began another lesson, passing on the knowledge that might finally set them free. As they drifted off to sleep, both girls knew there would be no turning back. The path ahead was dangerous, but for the first time since their capture, they had something the Drachnids couldn't take away: hope, built on the foundation of hidden knowledge and shared determination. The repair. Thunder rolled across the scrapyard as acid rain pelted the endless mountains of metal. The weather had turned, bringing storms that made the already dangerous work nearly unbearable. But for Rin and Zara, the storms brought opportunity. The Drachnid guards hated the acid rain. It irritated their scaled skin and clouded their thermal vision. During storms, they stayed in their sheltered posts, relying more on automated surveillance than direct oversight. This gave the girls precious minutes of relative freedom. The secondary power coupling is completely fused, Rin muttered, her small hands working inside the Titan's maintenance hatch. Acid rain dripped from her matted hair as she carefully extracted the damaged component. We'll need to fabricate a replacement. Zara kept watch, her dark eyes scanning for any sign of guard movement through the curtain of rain. The processing plant has raw materials, she whispered. But security is tight there. One wrong move, and she didn't need to finish the thought. They'd both seen what happened to workers caught stealing from the processing plant. The Drachnids considered it a capital offense, punishable by public execution. We don't have a choice, Rin replied, closing the hatch. Without that coupling, the neural interface will never stabilize. We'd fry our brains trying to connect. They made their way back to the work lines just as the storm began to ease. Their clothes were soaked through, but no more so than any other worker caught in the rain. The rest of their shift passed in tense silence, both girls planning their next move. That night, unable to sleep, Rin whispered into the darkness. Mother used to say that timing was everything in engineering. Not just knowing how to fix something, but knowing when to act. She turned to face Zora's bunk. Tomorrow's the facility inspection. Most of the guards will be occupied with the visiting overseer. Zora's voice came back, barely audible. The processing plant will still have security, but not as much, and they'll be distracted. Rin closed her eyes, remembering her mother's lessons. Sometimes you have to risk everything for a single crucial component. The next day dawned clear, the acid rain replaced by the usual heavy atmosphere. As expected, the facility was in chaos preparing for inspection. Guards hurried about, forcing workers to clean and organize normally neglected areas. Rin and Zara volunteered for the waste disposal detail, knowing it would take them near the processing plant. As they pushed their cart of scrap metal, they could see the main guard contingent assembled for inspection near the administration building. Now, Rin whispered as they passed behind the processing plant. They slipped through a gap in the fence, one they'd identified days ago. Inside, the automated machinery hummed, processing salvaged metals into usable materials. They moved quickly through the facility, avoiding the few guards left on duty. Rin led them to a storage area she'd spotted during previous waste runs. Inside, they found bins of processed materials, including the high-conductivity alloys they needed. Zara kept watch while Rin quickly fashioned a makeshift power coupling from the raw materials. Her mother's training guided her hands as she worked, bending and shaping the metal with practiced precision. A sudden shout from outside made them both freeze. Inspection detail approaching. They could hear footsteps getting closer. Rin worked faster, her fingers flying over the component. Zara grabbed her arm just as she finished, pulling her toward a ventilation duct they'd identified as their escape route. They squeezed through the duct, emerging behind the facility just as guards entered the storage area. Covered in grease and dust, they quickly rejoined their abandoned waste cart, hearts pounding. That afternoon, during another convenient storm, they installed the new power coupling. Rin's hands shook as she made the final connections, but her work was precise. The neural interface hummed to life, its status indicators glowing a soft blue. "It's working," she breathed, unable to contain her excitement. "The interface is stable." But their victory was short-lived. As they prepared to close the access panel, a harsh voice cut through the rain. Worker Units 271 and 273, step away from that debris pile. A Drachnid guard emerged from the storm, its crystalline whip already crackling with energy. Behind it, two more guards approached, their weapons raised. Routine inspection, the first guard announced, its scaled face twisting into what might have been a smile. Though I'm curious what's so interesting about this particular pile of scrap. Rin and Zara exchanged glances, their hearts sinking. They had come so far, done so much, only to be discovered now. The guard reached for the access panel they had tried to close. Thunder crashed overhead, and in that moment, Rin made a decision. Her mother's final lesson echoed in her mind. Sometimes survival means knowing when to stop hiding. She grabbed Zora's hand and squeezed it twice, their signal for absolute trust. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The storm raged on as the guard's clawed hand reached for their secret, their last hope for freedom hanging by a thread in the acid rain. Rising thunder. Time seemed to slow as the Drachnid guard's clawed hand reached for the access panel. Rin's mind raced through possibilities, each more desperate than the last. The neural interface hummed behind the panel, tantalizingly close to being operational. Now, Rin screamed, shoving the heavy panel outward with all her strength. It caught the first guard in the chest, sending it stumbling backward. Zara immediately understood, grabbing a piece of loose scrap and hurling it at the second guard. "Get to the hatch." Rin yelled as she scrambled up the pile of debris. The third guard's crystalline whip cracked through the air, missing her by inches. Zara followed, her smaller size allowing her to slip between gaps in the wreckage. They reached the Titan's emergency access hatch just as energy bolts began flying past them. Rin's fingers flew over the keypad, inputting the sequence her mother had made her memorize years ago. The hatch opened with a hydraulic hiss. Inside, she pushed Zora through before climbing in herself. The hatch sealed just as the guards reached them, their angry shouts muffled by the thick armor plating. Inside the Titan's control chamber, emergency lights cast everything in a red glow. Rin rushed to the pilot's station, while Zara took the weapon's position, just as they had planned during their late-night discussions. Neural interface initializing, Rin announced, her voice shaking as she connected the primary systems. "Remember what I taught you. Let the interface merge gradually. Don't fight it." Outside, they could hear more guards arriving. The Drachnids were bringing heavy cutting equipment, preparing to breach the Titan's armor. Zara's hands trembled as she activated her neural link. "It feels strange, like my mind is spreading out." "That's normal," Rin assured her, even as her own consciousness began to expand, merging with the Titan's systems. "The interface lets us feel everything the Titan feels. Every joint, every servo." Warning klaxons suddenly blared through the chamber. The external sensors showed dozens of Drachnid guards surrounding them, with more arriving every moment. "They're going to cut through eventually," Zara said, fear evident in her voice. Rin closed her eyes, focusing on the neural connection. Through the interface, she could feel the Titan's systems responding to her thoughts. Diagnostic data flowed through her mind. Power levels, structural integrity, weapon status. "Main reactor at 60% capacity," she reported. "Hydraulic systems responding. We can move." A harsh grinding sound echoed through the chamber as the Drachnids began cutting through the outer armor. They had minutes at most. Zara wrote emergency power to the stabilizers. "We're about to find out if our repairs worked." Through their neural links, both girls could feel the massive machine coming to life around them. Decades of accumulated rust and debris began falling away as servos engaged and joints flexed. "Reactor at full power," Rin announced. "Hydraulic pressure nominal." "Zara, weapon systems." "Online," Zara replied, growing more confident as she merged with the weapons interface. "Main cannons charged, point defense grid active." The Drachnid cutting tools suddenly breached the outer armor layer. Sparks showered into the chamber as they began working on the inner plating. Now or never, Rin whispered. She took a deep breath and initiated full system activation. The Titan shuddered, then began to move. Its massive legs straightened, pushing upward through years of accumulated debris. The sudden movement sent Drachnid guards tumbling from their cutting positions. Through the external cameras, they watched in amazement as their perspective rose higher and higher. The Titan stood to its full height, towering over the scrapyard. Debris cascaded off its armor plating like a metallic waterfall. "We did it," Zora exclaimed, then quickly focused as she saw Drachnid heavy weapons being brought to bear. Multiple hostile targets acquiring lock. Rin felt a surge of confidence flow through the neural link. This was what her mother had prepared her for, though neither of them had known it at the time. Show them what humanity's greatest war machine can do. The Titan's movement systems responded to her thoughts with fluid precision. Its massive arms swept down, scattering a group of guards who had been preparing to fire. Zora's control of the weapon systems proved equally precise, disabling vehicle after vehicle with carefully placed shots. "Main facility deploying combat units," Zora reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. Through their shared neural link, Rin could feel her friend's fear transforming into determined focus. The Drachnid response was swift and brutal. Combat skimmers rose from hidden hangars, their energy weapons blazing. Heavy artillery pieces were rolled into position, their barrels tracking the Titan's movement. But for every hit they landed, the Titan's armor held. Decades of neglect hadn't weakened its primary systems. Each step shook the ground. Each swing of its massive arms scattered opposition forces. "They're falling back to defensive positions around the main facility," Zara reported, maintaining constant weapons fire to keep the Drachnids suppressed. Rin allowed herself a small smile as she guided the Titan forward. "Then let's show them exactly what they've been using as a scrapyard. Fire control to you, Zora. Time to free everyone." The Titan advanced through the rain of energy bolts, its footsteps leaving deep impressions in the metal-strewn ground. The scrapyard that had been their prison was about to become the backdrop for their revolution, powered by hidden knowledge and the unbreakable bond between two friends who refused to remain slaves. Freedom's dawn. The main facility's walls crumbled under the Titan's assault, decades of oppression falling with each mighty blow. Through the neural interface, Rin could feel every impact, every movement as if it were an extension of her own body. Beside her, Zara maintained a constant barrage of suppressing fire, keeping the Drachnid forces scattered and disorganized. "Primary holding cells ahead," Zara announced, her voice steady despite the chaos. The neural link shared their emotions, and Rin could feel her friend's mix of excitement and anxiety. Security systems still active. Rin guided the Titan's massive fist through the facility's outer wall. "Not anymore," she replied as machinery and electronics crumpled under the impact. Through the breach, they could see hundreds of human prisoners staring in disbelief at their mechanical savior. "Warning," Zara called out, multiple heavy signatures approaching. "They're bringing in military-grade hardware." The tactical display showed a squadron of Drachnid war machines emerging from underground hangars, sleek, predatory vehicles designed for anti-armor combat. Rin felt a moment of doubt. The Titan was powerful, but it was also ancient, running on repairs they'd cobbled together from scrap. "How many?" 12. "No, 15 units, Zara reported. "Energy signatures suggest plasma lance weaponry. Our armor won't hold against sustained fire." As if to emphasize her point, the first salvo from the Drachnid machines struck the Titan's left leg. Warning indicators flashed through both girls' neural feeds as armor plating began to buckle. "We need to free the prisoners first," Rin decided, pushing the Titan forward despite the damage. "Everything else is secondary." They moved deeper into the facility, tearing through internal walls and security barriers. Behind them, the freed prisoners began overwhelming their guards, the sight of the Titan giving them courage to fight back after years of submission. Another blast rocked the Titan, this time penetrating the outer armor layer. Smoke filled the control chamber as systems began to fail. Power core stability dropping, Zara warned. We're losing structural integrity in the left arm. 10 minutes maximum before catastrophic failure. Rin gritted her teeth, pushing the machine harder. Then we'll make those 10 minutes count. They reached the maximum security wing, where the most resistant prisoners were kept. The ones who'd never stopped fighting, never accepted their fate. With one massive blow, the Titan's fist shattered the reinforced doors. Look, Zora gasped as the smoke cleared. Among the prisoners emerging from the cells was a familiar face, older, scared, but unmistakable. Mother, Rin whispered, her concentration almost breaking from shock. The woman looked up at the Titan, and even from their height, Rin could see the pride in her eyes. Somehow, she knew who was piloting the machine. Another blast from the Drachnid war machines brought them back to reality. The Titan's damage indicators were now critical, multiple systems failing simultaneously. Power core containment failing, Zora reported, her voice tight with concern. 5 minutes maximum. Rin made a decision. Reroute all power to weapons and broadcast systems. She opened the Titan's external speakers, her voice booming across the facility. Everyone get clear of the main buildings. Head for the outer perimeter. The freed prisoners needed no encouragement, streaming out of the facility as the Drachnid war machines closed in. Through the neural interface, Rin could feel the Titan's systems burning out, pushed far beyond their limits. 2 minutes to core breach, Zara announced. We need to eject. Not yet, Rin replied, turning the Titan to face the approaching Drachnid machines. Mother always said a power core breach could level a city block. Let's make it count. Understanding dawned in Zora's mind through their shared neural link. Together, they pushed the Titan forward, straight toward the heart of the Drachnid forces. The enemy machines, sensing victory, concentrated their fire on the approaching human war machine. 1 minute, Zora counted down. Ejection systems primed. They waited until the last possible moment, letting the Drachnid forces cluster around them, pouring fire into the Titan's failing armor. Now, Rin yelled. Both girls pulled their emergency releases simultaneously. The neural interface disengaged with a flash of pain as the escape pod blasted free from the Titan's head. From their tumbling pod, they watched as the Titan's power core finally breached. The explosion lit up the sky like a miniature sun, consuming the Drachnid war machines in a sphere of pure energy. The facility's remaining structures collapsed in the shockwave, years of careful organization reduced to chaos in seconds. Their pod crashed into a pile of scrap, the impact cushioned by emergency systems. As they climbed out, they found themselves surrounded by freed prisoners, including Rin's mother. I knew it was you, she said, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. I knew you remember everything I taught you. Zara joined them, and Rin pulled her friend into the hug. We did it together, she said firmly. Everything we did as a team. The sound of approaching ships made everyone tense, but these were different, sleek human vessels, their hulls bearing the insignia of the Liberation Fleet. The Titan's activation beacon, Rin's mother explained, smiling. It was broadcasting the whole time you were fighting. Help was already on the way. As the ships landed and human soldiers poured out to secure the area, Rin and Zara stood together, watching their prison burn. They were no longer slaves, no longer victims. Through knowledge passed down in whispers, through friendship forged in hardship, through courage found in desperate moments, they had written their own story of liberation. What happens now? Zara asked softly. Rin took her friend's hand, squeezing it just as she had done in that crucial moment during the storm. Now we make sure no one forgets what happened here. How 2 girls with nothing but hope and hidden knowledge brought down an empire of cruelty. Above them, more ships were arriving, their hulls gleaming in the dawn light. The age of Drachnid dominance was ending, brought down by the very people they had tried to break. And somewhere in the wreckage, buried under twisted metal and shattered dreams, lay the remains of humanity's greatest war machine, a titan that had awoken one final time to remind the galaxy that no prison could hold the human spirit forever.